the book we are talking about in the next half hour or so is Karim Kattan's second novel, L'Eden all'alba, Eden at dawn. It's been translated into English already, and it's one of the 5 novels that are finalists for the Rezzori Prize this year. I'm going to say just a very, very few things about the novel, and then we're going to talk about it. This is it's a love story, and I don't think I'm spoiling it because we know that if it's a love story, it doesn't end well. So yeah, it doesn't end well. It takes place mostly in Jerusalem, and the 2 main characters, named Isaac and Gabriel, find one another, fall in love with one another, and the relationship ends very badly for reasons that maybe I shouldn't reveal right now. But it all happens within a very specific framework, which is one horribly long summer, dominated by this wind that brings sand and blindness and despair to everybody around it. Now, I don't want to get too professorial, but I marked down 3 levels or dimensions of reality through which the novel unfolds. And one is sort of, let's call it reality. It's the dimension of the plot, where things happen, where these people meet and fall in love and so on. Then there's a mythical dimension, which takes place mostly in conversation, in the stories that these 2 characters tell one another. And some of them have to do with ancient, borderline mythical history of the land that they inhabit, and some of them have to do with just flat out mythology. And then there's a third dimension, which is, I guess we can call it poetic, prophetic, and it's a first person perspective which frames the whole novel, and it's the perspective of the sky, as an observer, as a storyteller, but also not an omniscient narrator, even though it is the sky and it's supposed to see everything, but it doesn't. This character, the sky, is very clear about the fact that I don't know, doesn't see everything. So the first thing I want to know, Karim, is how you came up with this structure, this very strange first person. And maybe later we can talk about the mythological moments in the book, but maybe talk about this strange first person of the sky as narrator.
Sure. Thank you for the introduction. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for the interpreters who haven't taken a break, which I find amazing. When I write texts or novels in general, I start with an intuition and I write around this intuition until I get to something which becomes a novel in the end. When I started writing Eden, my very simple desire was actually to write a very happy, poetic love story. I remember the word I thought of in French was I wanted it to be cute and poetic. I wanted it to end well. I wanted it to take place in Palestine, and I wanted it to have nothing to do with the occupation. Not in the sense that it was disconnected from the reality of the occupation, but I was like, well, maybe in a novel I can, have the luxury of imagining something else, which obviously didn't happen in the end. Um, and this love story that I imagined, I had the very strong intuition that I wanted it to be told by non-human narrators. So at first I had several narrators, in fact, not only the sky. I like to mention that because in my case, but I think in everyone's case, is a novel is merely the amount of corrections that you bring to your own work. Like it's just sewing mistakes until it becomes something else. Um, so when I started, I had three narrators. I always had this guy, but I also had two other narrators. One of them was a bird, which eventually stopped being a narrator and became the protagonist of some of the stories you mentioned. And the third narrator was a shoe. And I like to talk about the shoe because it says a lot about, I think, writing practice. When I started writing in the voice of the shoe, I thought I was brilliant. Like I was writing this shoe, and I was like, "This is amazing! Like this says something about like how in our intimacies we're two, and it was one shoe, not a pair of shoes. Like we're one, two, etc." I really was thinking about that, and eventually, I think it would be great for someone to write a narration with the shoe, but it didn't work. So the shoe disappeared. The reason I mentioned the shoe is once people know this, when you read the 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 voice of the sky, there's a few times where the sky actually speaks like a shoe, and this is like, this is the way the voice of the sky came to be. It was like a mix of all these voices, and so all the other narrators disappeared, and the sky remained as a perfectly evident narrator for me. I never thought about it too much, so everything I'm saying now is retrospective understanding, I think. But I think one of the things that allows me to do, because we're in Palestine, but the sky has a very different relationship to our timelines and our geographies. So yeah, to time and geography. So I think in the book it sort of liberates me from having to deal with a lot of things. There's a souffle. There's this length of breath that a sky narrator can have that I can't, neither as Karim or as a nondescript narrator. So, and the final thing, you said he, it, you don't know. One of my main regrets about the book is that in French, I name him because I use the French word le ciel. I use the masculine, but that sky is really very, very genderless, and it's also installing that you enter in a text whose relationship to gender is complicated because that's also very important in Eden. So I think the sky like operates all these different, allows me to play with different things like that.
Yeah, the shoe would have been interesting because in Italian it's feminine,
Oh, and French as well.
and in French as well, and yeah,
No, it was
in
a great
Spanish
idea
it's
from another
masculine.
book.
The shoe.
I give it to you, writers.
Uh,
Use a shoe.
Talking about these ambiguities, there's a fascinating ambiguity in the book, which is that the two main characters, Isaac and Gabriel, are never explicitly identified in their religion. There are hints, but there's I think we were talking about this last night. It almost feels like a deliberate attempt to keep that ambiguous.
Yeah. Okay, so my answer may be very long. Please feel free to cut me short if I'm going on too long. I'm a Palestinian and French writer. I write in French, which means I know that my primary audience is a French audience. So I know that my primary readership is generally European. This is also a gay story. In France, there is perhaps here as well. There's a certain appetite for you know gay Arab men writing about their experiences and how horrible they are because the Arabs are barbarians, which is something I'm very alert about not doing in French. And I'm very alert about how figures of specifically gay men are received in France. There is an enduring obsession with the religion of the Arabs. We try to, well, they try to figure out. Everyone's always trying to figure out my religion, and when they don't dare to ask me, they just try to see like, does he drink? Does he? As if this meant something. Does he? He does that. He does that. Like, what can I guess about what he is? So these two characters, Isaac and Gabriel, are Palestinians. You can understand probably things about their social class because they're probably from different social classes. You could possibly guess their religions if you wanted, but it's never so clear cut. And for me, it's a sort of, first of all, because I never thought about it in these terms, and it's a sort of invitation also to the reader to maybe be less obsessed with the religion of Arabs and of men specifically. And there's a section in the book, there's a chapter that I tend to dislike what I write, but I think this chapter is not bad. So one of the characters, Isaac, has a, let's say, sexual relation with the British consul in Palestine. I only made him British because it was too transparent if he was French, but he's French really. And it's the consul is having sex with Isaac, is looking at his naked body, and desperately trying to understand if Isaac is Christian or Muslim. And so he sort of cuts up Isaac. Well, he goes from the first problematic thing. He's like, they're all circumcised here, so I cannot guess from that. So then he sort of absurdly cuts up parts of Isaac, and he's like, oh, he has, I forget, but like he has Christian hands, but his chest seems a bit Islamic, but his lips are the lips of a Moorish person. So there's this imagination of what the body and the attitudes of Isaac say about him, which, I mean, I don't write only in response to things, but is again like an invitation to the reader, telling him, I know what you think. I know that you need to know this. Like, I understand, but I will not give you this pleasure of being able to identify these characters too much.
I'm really glad you're bringing him up. This is I wanted to ask you about this character. His name is Wargrave, the British consul. Now we know he's really a French consul,
Yeah.
but it's a very interesting character. And you already gave us some insight into him, but he is described at times as a humanist, as a pacifist. He is Palestinian friendly, and at the same time, he exchanges sexual favors for safe conducts, for documents that alleviate people's suffering and that allow people to move around more freely. This is a very harsh, in a way, critique of this type of well-intentioned Westerner who is trying to sympathize, but at the same time, he knows he will be gone soon, be somewhere else. And can you tell us about him a little more and and sort of this type of prototype?
Sure. I wouldn't even say he's a Westerner. He's a European, because I don't think like an American Westerner would have. He's a character who has, as I've seen many of them, who does have also, I think, a genuine affection for Palestine, and who comes to Palestine full of books, right? Like filled with books. And what he comes to see in Palestine is whether the books he comes to, that's what a pilgrim always does. He 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 wants to confirm that what he imagines and fantasizes is reality. So he comes to this territory, which is the territory of his dreams. Really, it's a dreamland, right, for these types of people, and he lives in dreamland. It so happens he's also a very powerful European person because he's a consul, and so he gets to. So a lot of the novel is this relationship between Isaac and Gabriel, who are two Palestinians of two different, not only social class, but also they have two different statuses as Palestinians. It's never made clear why. I don't like clarity, but you understand that they don't exactly have the same type of mobility. So they're always sort of, they can't do what they want to do. I also wanted someone who could, like travel. Like he can go wherever he wants. He can sort of fly over this country, enjoy this country, in fact, in a way that others can't. And so I really needed his perspective. It needed to be here to root what Isaac and Gabriel were. Um, it's also I mean, satire can be ungenerous if it's only satire. I also think he's a character with his own reality, and it is also a satire of myself because I mean, I'm not that, but parts of what he embodies are things I could be, perhaps, or gazes I could have if I'm not careful. Um, and so you said he exchanges sexual favors for safe conduct, which is, I think, Eden is. It's not very original in that regard, but it's very much a book that's interested in the relationships between power and desire and violence. In this way, it's a very gay book also. And so Wargrave, his inspired name, is is like one of the cruxes of these relationships between desire and power, as seen through through a European gaze. It is a book in French, written by a person. So, again, yes, I'm Palestinian. I also have a French passport, which means that I am among the people in the world, including possibly a lot of people here, who has the most obscene access to mobility, right? Except in Palestine. There I lose it all. But elsewhere, as a Frenchman, I have this access to mobility. And so I also wanted the book to reflect all these various issues within one character.
There's a crucial element in the book, and it's the wind, no, the kamsin.
Yeah.
That this is again a monstrously long summer um, that is marked by this wind. Can you tell us a little bit about the kamsin and about its role in the novel as um, uh, as a mechanism?
Yeah, so the Khamsin in the novel, it's an actual wind that exists in at least most countries of the around Palestine, perhaps elsewhere. It's usually a shitty 4 days where there's this sand wind that's blowing and you're full of sand and everything's full of sand and you can't breathe and it's horrible, but it lasts a couple of days. In the novel, it's sort of a season that starts in February that removes Palestine from the world. Like the rest of the world disappears because of this like monstrous wind, and it lasts from February to October or November until the end of the story, which is happier than you present. Um, well, it was at first it was clearly like a playful aesthetic choice. Like I also want to say I love fiction. I'm a fiction writer. I wanted also the reader to know from the outset you are in fiction. I lie. These are all lies. So the wind sort of installs this, right? But I realized as it went on that I think it accomplishes something else. So the occupation, specifically of the West Bank. I say specifically of the West Bank because this is where I'm from. We often know foreigners, people abroad, know the occupation because of its more spectacular manifestations, right? And of its more spectacular violence. People will think about the apartheid wall, right? But this is not exactly what the occupation is. The occupation is a very specific structure that administers how Palestinians are born, how they live, how they die, and everything in between. And as such, it is also an administration, and the power of the occupation is partly in all its invisible workings, not in its more spectacular manifestations. Like the wall, for example. I mean, wall or no wall, Palestinians have the same amount of lack of mobility. Even if the wall were not, it's still. I'm not minimizing what the wall is, but I'm just saying that it is not. The occupation is not that. It's all the rest. And so the wind sort of installs, I think, this environment, this feeling of being constantly asphyxiated and of a very low level constant violence that just defines everything in the book without ever being spectacular. And I think it sort of allows me to try to say something about the workings of this occupation by this constant low level thing that's always forbidding these characters from doing anything.
And you're talking about space, and the city of Jerusalem is a very important character itself in the book, and I would love to hear you talk about your own relationship with the city, writing about it from a distance, temporal distance, but also geographic distance. You're from there. What is that like?
I have a weird relationship to Jerusalem. I was born in Jerusalem but grew up in Bethlehem. I am from Bethlehem, from a Bethlehem family. We're very, very much attached to that. So people from Jerusalem tend to see people from Bethlehem as des ploucs. uh, I don't. They tend to see us as oh God. I don't. Anyway, uh, um, I'm a West Bank Palestinian, meaning that I have what is called a Palestinian passport and a green ID card, which means I can go to Jerusalem. But I went to school all my life in Jerusalem illegally. So what I could do was go from my house in Bethlehem and cross over in very weird ways to Jerusalem, straight to school, to the French school, stay within the bounds of the school, and then go back. Whenever I could actually practice Jerusalem is when, as a teenager, I figured out that I could leave school without being seen. So it became a city that was very like it's a forbidden city, so it was very exciting. Like for me, Jerusalem is very sexy. There's this thing like it's sexy, the old city, the men, like there's something like that that I didn't have access to in Bethlehem, and forbidden, and so I have this strange relationship because I know Jerusalem extremely well and not at all. Whenever I go to the old city, which is a tiny old city, I mean I've been going there for 30 years, I get lost. Oh, I cannot orient myself in this place. Which makes the Jerusalem of the book, which is it's a fiction of Jerusalem, right? It's a literature of Jerusalem much more than it is any type of recognizable. It is recognizable to me, but I'm not sure it's recognizable to anyone else. It's a myth of Jerusalem.
Um, we were talking about Shakespeare before, and well, I mean, the whole story obviously makes you think of Romeo and Juliet in the sense that the only place that lovers can be truly safe is in this imagined Eden, completely isolated from the world. But this place doesn't really exist, or it exists for just a few instants. But there's another, and maybe I'm completely wrong in my reading, but there's a moment that was very Shakespearean to me, just towards the end, when Isaac and Gabriel are frolicking out on the grass, and they are covered by a sheet. So they're under a sheet, and they're seen by a group of soldiers. And it reminded me of a moment in The Tempest when I think it's Stefano and Trinculo, they find Caliban, and one of them hides under a sheet with Caliban, and the other one finds them and thinks that it's a monster because it has 4 legs. Um, but I think, at least in the novel, it's a great way to show how human beings become dehumanized immediately. They're seen as something that they cannot understand. What is that? Is that a person? Is that a monster?
There's also, I think, another Shakespearean element, which I would say, like probably all Palestinian novels always have, is the fact that because there is an illegitimate ruler on the land is completely out of joint. You know, so this is also why there's this season, there's this sort of catastrophic nature around. Like there's this element of it. Yeah, dehumanization is a complicated thing. I don't know. I think it's an answer to your question, but I'm not sure. Sometimes when people read the book, in France at least, they tell me this absolutely mind-boggling sentence, which is, "Ah, we're so happy to read a book that I know that's not what you're saying, but to read a book that humanizes Palestinian men." I was like, but like, if you need to read a book to humanize people, there's a problem. Like the problem is it comes from very like from so much further back. Um, there is a So the scene you talk about is a scene of extreme violence. It's one of two scenes of violence, I would say, which is a scene that is so violent that I have even when I don't read it again. It's even, I think, a sort of pornographic. There's a sort of pornographic violence to it, and it always makes me feel uncomfortable. And I think I was more interested in this. I think, or at least I know that as I wrote it, the focus I had was on the pornography of violence, because it's also a culmination of the various types of violent or non-violent sexual encounters or sexual fantasies that occur throughout the book, and that in fact, I mean, these two characters, Isaac and Gabriel, are constantly dehumanized, but also in very nice ways, because it's a book about metamorphosis. That's for me the main topic of the book: how men, people, but in this case, men change and change and change. And without talking about the end, in the end, one of the characters is fully dehumanized, we can say, but in a, let's say, uh, b- beautiful way, perhaps.
He becomes a shoe. No.
Should have.
No,
No,
one.
but you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, yeah,
there's
one last question. You mentioned before you have a novel coming out next year. Can you tell us about it?
It's coming out this year in September. It's a road trip. It takes place in an unnamed country, in which we can recognize or not Palestine. I don't think it's necessary. And this country is undergoing an apocalypse, which is not characterized. It could be military, it could be supernatural, you don't know, but something is happening. And you follow two characters, a man and a woman, who are at the southern border of this country. It's twilight, and they need to get to the northern border before dawn, because everyone understands that at dawn the country will disappear. So you're just it all takes place only in the car, and it follows their trip from the south to the north as their country disappears.
Great. Any questions?
So, so in French, it's septentrional, which means in the feminine, au féminin, because it's the name of. So septentrional means northern, right, in French. But in the novel, it's the name of the star that they're following, which is la septentrionale. So donc septentrional. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.